topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Hi there. Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, joining you live from Dallas, Texas, which is home base for me. If you don't know me yet, I'm a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, organizational logotherapist, inspirational speaker, social scientist, and author. My team and I help companies discover and articulate their purpose to thread it through their culture and operations. And we work with forward-thinking or forward-reaching organizations to develop inspirational leaders who create cultures where people actually want to come to work and do their best. And we provide programs that enable individual team members and leaders to discover and unleash their passion and purpose at work to catalyze fulfillment, engagement, and productivity. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at alisecortez.com. With us today is Russ Laraway, who has had a diverse 28-year operational management career. He recently became the Chief People Officer at Goodwater Capital, a Silicon Valley venture capital firm, and he's the author of When They Win, You Win. Being a great manager is simpler than you think, which we'll be talking about today on the program. He joined today from Alpine, Utah. Captain or Commander Laraway, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thanks a lot for having me, Alise. Captain Laraway works. That was my rank. That was my rank when I got out of the Marines, but some old colleagues at Google, actually, they call me the Commander. That was my nickname. So
I like them both. And before we get into our conversation, let's just first do this. Look at this gorgeous thing you brought into the world. Look at this gorgeous book.
I have one right here too. It seems like it's spreading.
I like that. We want that to happen, don't we? I know what it is to bring a book in the world. It's a bit like birthing a child, so I can appreciate what you've been going through. So
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So first, I want our listeners and viewers to know about our exchange this afternoon. You reached out to me. We had this conversation planned for a few weeks, I believe. I read your book. Of course, it's gorgeous. And then this afternoon, about 3 hours ago, you sent me this little text that said, "Hey, heads up. Just tested positive for COVID. Just so you know, not sure how this is going to fly." So Russ, thank you for pulling up the boots and being here and showing up. So appreciate that.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I think it's good for your listeners to know that maybe if I occasionally have an annoying throat clear or if I sound very congested, the reason is why I'm managing the symptoms just fine with an awful lot of, ibuprofen and a little bit of decongestant, and we're getting by okay. So I think we're gonna be able to keep the energy up for the show.
Well, let's just soldier on for the next 50 minutes. We got this. So let's let our listeners and viewers understand just who we are working with here. You have an amazing 28-year background with very diverse experiences. Will you just quickly sort of showcase those experiences, because together combined they're pretty potent?
Yeah, thanks. I started out my career as an infantry officer in the United States Marine Corps. I think probably the most important thing to say there is that I culminated my career there as a company commander. So I led 175 combat Marines. And then after I got out of the Marine Corps, I spent about 4 years there. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I actually founded a small company. We focused on supply chain problems for larger companies. So we had customers like DuPont, Cardinal Health, and that was called Pathfinders. Funny enough, I founded that company with my best friend since 7th grade and best friend since 5th grade, worked in the company. We had a great time. And, we did some really good things for a lot of companies. Partner and I sold that. Then I went to the Wharton School and got an MBA there. After the Wharton School, I went on to Google, where I was there for 7 years. I had probably three different jobs. Maybe the highlights there. At one point, I led a 750 or so person or 700 person global team. And a different job, I had a $700 million revenue line. So I've been primarily in go-to-market type roles. Then on to Twitter, where I founded and ran our small business advertising channel, which is, at a place like Twitter. Nike is a very large advertiser. They want to spend a lot of money, but my job was to go find the other 100 or so million advertisers out there and get them onto Twitter. and then after that, I founded a little company called Candor Inc. with Kim Scott, the woman who wrote Radical Candor. And our goal was to help people have better relationships at work, based around the book Radical Candor. And then after that, I left to go to Qualtrics. And my first HR job, I became the chief people officer at Qualtrics, which is a Utah-based B2B SaaS company focused on employee experience and customer experience for their customers. And just very recently, as you mentioned, popped over to a venture firm called Goodwater Capital. We're just a little bit different. We use machine learning and AI to more intelligently source and scale our investments. And my job is not only to be the chief people officer of Goodwater, but also to advise our portfolio companies on matters related to people. So that's the career, and maybe a nutshell, but a walnut shell, I guess. Maybe a little bit too long there, but yeah, it's been quite a ride for the last 28 years.
And we're now the beneficiaries of that, so that's fantastic. So let's just get right into it and just throw the 1-2 punch right now, shall we, Russ?
Let's do it.
So one of the things that you write in your book is that the whole book is about helping managers manage better and get better results. And at the heart of your message, you are essentially addressing the employee engagement phenomenon so many companies struggle with. When it gets really interesting, here's the punch, ladies and gentlemen, is you write in the book that when it comes down to engagement, the manager explains 70% of engagement. That's the variable. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're a manager, you are 70% of whatever that engagement score is, better or worse. How do we make that pill a little bit easier to swallow, Russ?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's managers are holding the keys. And by the way, there's not a close second place. And so that actually comes from Gallup. And so I actually got to talk to the guy who did that study. His name's Larry Emond. He just left Gallup this past year after, I think, 28 years or something. And the insight here is that in very large data sets, when you observe a positive variance in employee engagement, say from an average, 70% of that variance is statistically explained by commensurate variance in manager quality. So simply said, better engagement usually means better management. Worse engagement usually means worse management. So that's the big insight. And so, and then employee engagement, importantly, has an extremely strong relationship itself with business results. And so I think a lot of people think engagement means like what I think engagement is, or what Dr. Cortez thinks engagement. It's not that. I just had a call recently with a customer, and I asked them if they were measuring engagement. And the person on the other end of the conversation said, "Oh, yes, we are. When we hold an all hands, most of our people show up, and that's kind of how we measure engagement." That's not it. It's not the sort of colloquial version we think of.
Mm-hmm.
We can see it in real life. It's actually a really durable 30-year-old IO psychological measurement that is usually you get at it with a half dozen or so questions. And this measurement has an extremely strong relationship with business outcomes. And so I put these three ideas together. The fact that the manager is most likely to affect engagement, and the fact that engagement is most likely to predict the results of the enterprise. If you put them together, the most important question to answer is, what is it that managers actually do that measurably and predictably affects both engagement and results? So that's kind of how we got there. And engagement's the middle, just like you teed up this question. Engagement is dead center of the model.
Yeah. So I want to serve this up here next, ladies and gentlemen, listeners and viewers. And this isn't totally in the spirit of helping you and developing you. That's why Russ and I are both here. So if you're one of those people that are saying things like, these people just don't want to work. These people just don't give the effort. These people don't whatever. You're on the other end of that management 70% quotient we're talking about. So there's a real opportunity here. So pay attention. We've got some good stuff for you here. Russ has written an amazing book. It's chock full of all kinds of useful information. So we're going to dive into some of the things that he talks about here. So let's next go into, you organize this whole big, beautiful book around 3 key elements that you address to improve leadership in your book. So let's just hear about those 3 first so people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I call them the big three, and they are simply direction, coaching, and career. And that actually, the big three sort of breaks down into 12 distinct behaviors that we were able to measure. In fact, we measured them every single quarter for 4 years while I was at Qualtrics, and found a very strong relationship between those behaviors and employee engagement. In fact, what we found was for plus or minus 2 points in manager effectiveness, or that measurement we made around the big three, plus or minus 2 points yielded plus or minus 1 point in employee engagement. And so I've never seen an elasticity like that before. I'm not sure one exists outside of the book. And again, third-party research predicts this. We found it in our first-party research as well. And so direction is really about making absolutely certain, not kind of certain, not I'm pretty sure, but absolutely certain that the folks on your team know exactly what is expected of them and when it's expected by. Mm-hmm. Coaching is really about helping people to either continue the things that they're doing that are working, or giving them the other kind of coaching, sometimes called hard feedback, the kind of coaching where you help them to improve the things they need to improve, both with an eye toward making them as successful as possible. And then career is really about breaking out of this, I don't know, maybe sometimes we call it a transactional relationship. So I think a lot of managers make this simple mistake. They think that their relationship is only confined to the 2 to 4 years that they're with this employee. And if we're lucky at employees at a company for 4 years, that one manager might have them for 2, something like that. I actually think the manager's job is to enable the full trajectory, which started long before they got to you and will continue long after. I don't know if have you ever seen a space movie, Alise?
A couple of times.
Okay. Yeah. And so you ever seen the slingshot maneuver in a space movie?
Probably, but tell me what it is.
Yeah. So it's like in The Martian, right? They were going home and they're like, oh no, he's still alive on Mars. And they have to go back and get him. And so they don't have enough fuel. The mission's in jeopardy. And so what they do is they do a slingshot maneuver, which is, this is in every space movie ever, by the way, which is where they use the planet's gravity, as a slingshot or a gravity assist to launch them back out into the far reaches of space to complete their mission. And so while I don't advocate that managers physically launch their people anywhere, the idea, though, is that while you are managing this human being on your team, your job is absolutely to enable their long-term success, to launch them into the far reaches of their career. So direction, coaching, and career. And we took those 12 behaviors that build up to those big three, and we measured them a bunch, all that. But separately, I decided that one of the reasons I think that managers are failing, and by the way, the evidence is pretty strong that they are,
right,
despite mountains and mountains of content about how to be better, I think it's because it's also confusing. There's too much of it. It doesn't hang together. By the way, almost none of it holds itself to measurable account in terms of measurably and predictably delivering more engagement, better results. So if you're going to be that guy, the guy who claims that it's complexity that's causing managers to fail, you better also be the guy who offers a simpler version of the job. And so I do this exercise a lot with folks when I teach or speak, which is to ask them, write the simplest version of the manager job description.
Yeah, you do that in the book too, beautifully.
Yeah. Which I don't care if it's the CEO of Google or if it's the manager of the frontline sandwich shop at Jersey Mike's. Same job description for every manager in the world. And by the way, you only have 2 bullet points, right? And so as you know, because you read the book, what I came up with is deliver an aligned result and to enable the success of the people on your team. Just every manager does those 2 things. Well, it turns out the big 3, direction, coaching, and career, map perfectly over top of that. So direction is really about delivering an aligned result. Aligned is the word doing a ton of work in that sentence. And then coaching and career are really about enabling success. Coaching more in the short run, helping a person become better or continue to be successful at their current role. And career is really about enabling their long-term success. What's the dream job and what are the small investments we can make right now to help you make tangible progress toward that dream in the future? So that's kind of how the big three works. We could go into as much or little detail as you like. And
so we'll talk more about all of them as we go here. But the next thing I want to do before we go into our first break here is I want to position how important the work that you're doing in your book, and I hope that I'm doing as well, to help organizations, which means that everybody needs to be involved. And you share something really, really important in your book, and you talk about how there's the tendency for senior leaders to recognize their people need this management leadership training. They need it, and there's a myriad of reasons why they don't have time to do it or don't need it, kind of thing, and what a horrible, atrocious mistake that is. So can you speak to that tendency?
Yeah, I think senior leaders often make a couple of big mistakes. They think their job's to run the company. That's technically true, but your job is to run the company by managing your 7 or 8 staff members, not really much beyond that. And a lot of times senior people think their senior leaders don't need blocking and tackling management. This is false. Senior leaders opt out. So I did this session one time with a pretty successful Silicon Valley company. The CEO herself hired me. She was fully present, engaged. She was great. But we had the whole company there, classroom style. And the VPs were the vice presidents. So her senior team were sort of around the outside, standing up, arms folded, like sort of unearned confidence, body language, if I may. And they had this body language like, oh yeah, this is good for the people. This is really good. I'm so glad. And the reason they were standing, Alise, is because the first chance they got, first break, they were going to all jet because they had something more important to do.
Right.
It wasn't my first rodeo. In fact, several people after that session came up to me and asked, is there any way you can put our senior folks through this session again? Because we were saying things that this is how hey, Russ, this is how I want to lead. But it's hard for me to do that when my boss doesn't know the standard I'm trying to lead by. And I always say leadership by example never goes out of style.
Right.
And so the idea that you're going to be effective senior manager without at least knowing the leadership standard that works for your more junior folks is it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, agreed. I've been also facilitated many, many sessions too, Russ, where people will say, this is a really great, can you send my boss to this?
Exactly.
Same thing. It's the same thing. So, and we're never done learning and growing anyway, right? So let's just send our listeners and viewers into the break with that idea. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Russ Laraway, who is the author of When They Win, You Win. Being a great manager is simpler than you think. We've been talking a bit about his expertise and really the importance of employee engagement. After the break, we're going to get into and dive deeper into those 3 elements that he talked about before. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us. Before we get back into the program, I want you to, while you're out there looking at Amazon for Russ's book, check out mine as well. It's called Purpose Ignited. I wrote that book to awaken readers to their passion and purpose and start them down the path of becoming an inspirational leader. So it should align with what we're talking about here today. So check that out while you're there looking for Russ's. If you're just joining the program, my guest is Russ Laraway, who has had a diverse 28-year operational management career. He recently became the Chief People Officer at Goodwater Capital, a Silicon Valley venture capital firm, and he's also the author of When They Win, You Win. Being a great manager is simpler than you think. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So Russ, when I read my books, and I've been hosting the show for 7.5 years, what I try to do is pull out specific things in your work, in your book, that add or to the conversation we've been having already. So there's a few things that I think are very unique and special about what you've said that I want to particularly showcase here. So the first one here, talking about the direction, which you mentioned, you have already said, you introduced it in the first segment here, but you say that there are 4 aspects to it. If you could share those to kick us off, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Four-part direction framework with 2 long-term elements and 2 short-term elements. The long-term elements are purpose and vision. And the short-term elements are quarterly goals, which a common approach to that in tech is to use OKRs, objectives and key results. And then extremely short-term is your priorities for a day or for a week. And so we use the two long-term elements together. We use two long-term elements, two short-term elements in order to help people know what is expected of them at any given time. Purpose is really answers the question, why do we exist? I think it's akin to mission. I think, maybe in pretty aligned with your work, but maybe sometimes this is why this team exists. What happens if we don't show up tomorrow? What bad thing happens? And vision is really it's actually more tangible and a little bit less persistent, meaning purpose tends to last a very long time. For companies, sometimes purpose doesn't even change over a decade or 2 decades, but a vision will change every couple, 3 to 5 years. And vision, a lot of people say it's the hill we're trying to climb. I like that because if you think about a landscape that has a hill, usually has a lot of hills. And if you're not very precise about which hill we're trying to climb, then you can end up with a bunch of people on a bunch of different hills. And so those are the two long-term elements, and then two short-term elements, quarterly goals. We must set a small number of really impactful, measurable goals that ideally align with the company's objectives. And then we should organize our daily and weekly, work around what those goals are. And I call those our priorities. So maybe five things you got to get done in a week toward your quarterly goals, or 3 things you got to get done in a day. Not a task list, because prioritization is an exercise in subtraction, not an exercise in addition.
I love that, by the way. I love that phrase because I always have way too long of a to-do list. It just sets me up for failure every time. So that was a big thing I took from your book too. You mentioned the idea of the core team purpose, and I like that. You already said that, so I'll go past that. What really resonated with me, and I've never heard anybody say this before, Russ, which is so cool. You say purpose and vision ultimately serve as the invisible leader. I love that. Providing direction and guidance in the absence of specific direction and guidance. I think that is so incredibly powerful. So it helps. It's why it's so important to be able to do the hard work of articulating, of detecting those things within your organization, because then it's there, that invisible leadership. That's so gorgeous.
Yeah, thanks. I actually stole that from one of the guys on my team at Qualtrics.
Okay, good.
Yeah, he. With his permission, he's very happy to see that show up in the book. But there's this. So it's funny. I've done a lot of sessions with managers and their teams, and vision and purpose are the ones that a lot of people, they think, oh, that's vision, that's what Elon does, or purpose, but that's what Zuckerberg did,
Right.
And so I'll take them through the exercise, and I'll ask them to before we get into it, each of you tell me what you think your team's purpose is. And I think a lot of folks think it's just self-evident. And I'm here to tell you, it never is. I
understand.
Yeah, it must. I bet you see this all the time. Same with vision, by the way. And so, the really tangible stuff are the short-term elements. Our quarterly goals, if they're any good, they're clear and they're measurable. Our daily and weekly priorities are clear and ideally measurable, clearly supporting long-term objectives. But sometimes we have to do work that's not covered by our quarterly objectives and not covered by our daily and weekly priorities. And often the place we would look for guidance is the vision and the purpose. And so I think having your team know what those are, having developed those things collaboratively with your leadership team is crucially important. I tell this story in the book about CrossFit. And CrossFit's hard and it's expensive. And I do it and I love it, but it's also very efficient and very effective. Like, you get really good fitness outcomes in a really small amount of time. But I find a lot of times that sometimes in a real tough workout, and it turns out that in 2002, the founder of CrossFit wrote an article called "What is Fitness?" Which is actually the first ever robust definition of fitness to exist. And he built the CrossFit program around that definition of fitness. It's measurable and it's humble, and it has moved and swayed over the years as different approaches have demonstrated an ability to get better measurable fitness outcomes. And I used to, when I get people involved in CrossFit, I would always ask them to read that article first, because I think it's really important to know. So when you sit there and you say, what am I doing this for?
Right.
Actually, I don't think leaving the answer, same at work. I don't think leaving the answer up to, oh, they'll figure it out. I think that might be malpractice, and so I think having not just the answer to a negative question, but people understanding exactly every day why their team exists inside this company, knowing every day why their company exists in the world, it makes it so much easier for them to tie their work every single day to what the company is doing. It makes it easy for them to answer the question, why do I matter? And so I think purpose and vision really help solve a big problem. Like when people constantly report, I don't know how my work contributes to what this company's doing. Right. These are the first line of defense to making sure people can actually answer that question.
I love it. Gorgeous, just gorgeous. It is. So glad you rallied and came on.
Where'd you get that New York accent?
I'm talking to you, I guess. I don't know. Just
right.
something. Sometimes that just rubs off on me. I'm a wannabe. What can I say? I'm from Oregon originally. All right, let's get into the coaching element here. I also really appreciate how you distinguish it, and you did this in the first segment here, but you distinguish that there's the improvement as one critical form of coaching, and the other, of course, is praise, sometimes known as continue coaching. So what I appreciate about what you're talking about here, Russ, and I'm sure you know this a million times over, most people focus on the corrective coaching, what you're doing wrong, how to fix a problem, how to change a behavior. So I really appreciate that you hit a fuller complement, and the way you do it is much more, it's developmental.
Yeah. I think it's natural for people to want to focus on the improvement side, a hard conversation. Everybody starts hand wringing when that conversation's coming up. And that's understandable. There's actually, I go over it in the book, but there's a lot of complicated, but really fun and interesting brain chemistry at play that makes that difficult for everyone. The bottom line is the manager has sort of like a selfish reason they don't want to do that, and they have a selfish reason. Selfless reason. The selfless reason is they know it's going to make this other person feel bad. They don't want to do it. The selfish reason is I don't want to deal with your emotional response.
Yes, you say that very nicely in the book.
Yeah, and so a lot of people have a lot of hangups about that, and it's totally understandable. No, it's not that you have thin skin; it's just that you're human. But what's interesting about that is I believe that continue coaching. So the stuff that is specific and sincere about what's going well, you should actually do that about 5-1, not infinity to 1, not 5-0. And I got that from the Positive Coaching Alliance, actually, which is a nonprofit that operates at all levels of sports, from professional all the way down to youth. And I was coaching Little League. And this really struck me here about what people are doing well, whether it's their work products or their behaviors. And I took this to my 9, 10, 11-year-old Little League team, and I kept the book. It was literally just a book. It wasn't the most clever name I've ever come up with, but it was a lab notebook where I wrote down everything they did well, starting with on time to practice. If you were late to practice, we didn't call you out, because let's face it, if a 9-year-old is late to baseball practice, that's their parents' fault. That's not the kid. Right. The kid didn't. And so on time to practice, counting loudly during stretching, all the way through to the proper technique for fielding a ground ball. Center the ball in your stance, get your glove in the dirt, cover it with your throwing hand, get it up to your shoulder as quickly as possible, back foot, front foot, fire over to first. If you think about that, saying we're coaches, we're not cheerleaders, right? Cheerleaders are on the side saying, good job. That's not useful. The coach is there. It's energetic. They're with the players. It's all about getting better. And to be a good coach, you have to be very specific. And so that's the standard. Be specific and sincere. And here's the thing, Alise, that's really cool. How many people are out there saying, my boss doesn't even know what I do?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And by the way, they're probably right a lot of times. And this is because the boss doesn't regularly start to give continue coaching that is very specific. It forces you to become very conscious and explicit about the team standards. And by the way, you start doing that as a matter of habit, 5-1 over your improvement coaching, at least. Your team will not go home and say, my boss doesn't even know what I do, because you will demonstrate every day that you know exactly what they're doing. And so it's really powerful. And by the way, you can't assume people know what's working. What I do in one context might be very effective. In another context, it might not be. And so reminding them what they're doing, behaviors and work products, that is working well, I think is really, really strong way to lead. And by the way, who would want to be on the team where the manager's constantly saying something like, do you know what I love about, do you know what I love about the way you ran the team meeting today? Do you know what I love about the way you answered that customer service ticket? Do you know what I love about that code that you wrote? on and on. And now you're reinforcing the things that are working. Really, really powerful. And I think just doesn't get enough attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like the 4-step process that you outline in the book as well. I mean, it's so simple, but it's so effective. Just why don't we do more of this?
For asking for feedback.
Yeah. For asking for feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. So, by the way, Alise, these two things that you're touching on, continue coaching and asking for feedback from the team, and I'll hit that 4-step process. Those two behaviors have the two strongest correlations with employee engagement.
Interesting.
And so soliciting feedback is really about asking what can be better. It's not about, hey, how great am I? It's really about asking what could be better. And so the first thing you do is you ask an open-ended but specific question that invites a challenge. So for example, how could I have run our team meeting better? Or what more can I do to enable your success? Or, hey, if this were your budget, how would you spend it? Or what opportunity in the marketplace is our team missing? These are the kinds of questions. Step 2 is shut up. So just be quiet and embrace the discomfort, because now your team will quickly sort out. You're asking them to give criticism about what's happening around here. And that's not comfortable. But if you start talking, they're just going to let you do that. So be quiet, sit the silence, and be very comfortable with that. Third step is listen with the intent to understand and not respond. So if you start asking for examples, which we're all taught to bring examples, but if you start asking for them, this could feel like a cross-examination to your team. Instead, so what I think I hear you saying is, if I were to do X or Y or Z differently, your life would improve in A or B or C ways. Do I have that right? You have curious body language, not, don't get mad, get curious. And last is reward the candor. So not just say thank you, but actually show they've been heard. And then ideally act on some of the input you've gotten from them, right? You can't act on all of it. You are responsible for everything your team does or fails to do, and you need managerial discretion. But Krista Quarles, who used to be the CEO of OpenTable, she had a 5% rule. Someone gives you tough feedback, find 5%, just a measly, paltry 5% you can agree with, and then act on that. And here's the bottom line: like, raise your hand if you want to go to work, be on a team, and not be heard. It's literally nobody.
Pick me.
Yeah, exactly. And so the managers that go through this, they eventually don't need to ask anymore. Eventually it starts to come, because they see a positive pattern where they've been heard. They didn't get canned. They've been heard and their stuff's been acted on, and the team's getting better and better because the manager's listening to the people who have all the answers, which are the people on the team.
What a concept. I love this, Russ. Great stuff. All right, let's grab our last break here. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Russ Laraway, who is the author of When They Win, You Win. Being a great manager is simpler than you think. We've been talking about some of the key concepts from his book. We're going to finish the conversation with a few more of them and tell a few more stories. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us, and welcome back to Working on Purpose. One other thing I want to share before we get back on with Russ. Again, once you're out there on Amazon, another one I want to share with you. Last August of 2021, I got an anthology out. It's called Passionately Striving and Why. And what I did was I literally scoured the world, the planet, for 25 women who would share their very intimate story of how they discovered their purpose and are now serving from it. So that is a compilation of all of their stories. And the idea is that it's one part educational and the second part is inspirational. Come join us. So I hope you'll check it out. If you're just joining the program today, my guest is Russ Laraway, who has had a diverse 28-year operational management career. He recently became the Chief People Officer at Goodwater Capital, a Silicon Valley venture capital firm. And he's the author of When They Win, You Win. Being a great manager is simpler than you think. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So I want to have I want to take this here into a couple of your coaching conversations that you talk about, Russ. So one, there you have a 4-part process that you used in giving coaching or feedback to help people, and I think it's useful because it's very specific, and I like how I think it's hard for people to give that kind of feedback and coaching. So if you could go through that, and then afterwards, I also want to have the one about the career conversation as well.
Cool. Yeah, you're talking about the 4 steps to coaching the boss, or are you talking about situation, behavior, impact?
Situation, behavior, impact.
Situation, behavior, impact. Yeah. So, so whether you're giving continue coaching or improvement coaching, I think it's helpful to have a structure. And so I borrowed one structure, situation, behavior, impact. I actually borrowed that from the Center for Creative Leadership. It's like a 100-year-old company, thousands of customers. And I'll explain a bit what these mean. But then I realized that situation, behavior, impact was incomplete because it's not just behaviors we need to coach people on. We also need to coach them on work products.
Right.
So I developed the companion idea, which is situation, work, impact. Like last Thursday, they've been around 100 years, situation, behavior, impact, like last Thursday I came up with. And so, and if you think about it, we're all there to drive results. And so the way we drive results, it's not only what we get done, the work products we deliver, but also how we get it done, our behaviors. And so I think those two together get us most of the way there. And so the idea is that there are no silver bullets on the improvement side. This stuff helps, to clarify your thinking, but the conversation on the improvement side can still be pretty tough. The other thing to say is on the continue side, you should still use a structure. I think a lot of people make the mistake, that while they prepare and rehearse and get ready for the very tough improvement conversation, they don't do that with the continue coaching and continue conversation. And it's just as important. In fact, I think maybe even a little bit more important. So what are they? So let's take situation, behavior, impact. Situation means what is the situation where you observed, say, an adverse behavior or a positive behavior. That could be the context, that could be the problem, or as broadly as possible, the situation. What was the specific behavior in question, and where do you get your behavioral standards, right? You get them from maybe a respectful workplace policy or a code of conduct. Maybe you get them from your core values, which I think are the highest leverage ideas. There's a bunch of places you can get them. And then last is, what was the impact of the behavior? Same with work products, exactly the same, only with work products. So what that might sound like is Tom, in our team meeting, so that's the situation, that's instant context of what happened. When you became defensive, as Tammy tried to give you some input on how your analysis could be more robust, that's the behavior. He became defensive. I think that created a number of issues for all of us, including violating one of our core values as a team, which is to help everybody to be great. And that's all Tammy was trying to do, was to help make your analysis better so our team has better decision support on what we're trying to do. Something like that. So but on the positive side, what I might say to Tammy is, Tammy, in our team meeting, I really loved the way you pushed Tom on his analysis. So that's the behavior. By doing that, you are helping to fulfill our team's core value of helping each other to be great. By helping him sharpen his pencil and deliver a better analysis that will help our team have better decision support. So that's an improvement example, and then a continue example around a behavior. And the behavior was built around Tammy offering input on how the analysis could be better to Tom. Tom behaved poorly by becoming defensive. Tammy behaved well by taking that action, which would have been difficult in the team meeting. So that's kind of how they work together.
Beautiful. And I just think that helps our listeners and viewers so much. It's very tangible. I like very much to be able to provide an elevated philosophy on the show, Russ, plus practical takeaways they can immediately put to use. And you are doing both. So, and with COVID. Okay. So this next thing that I want to talk about, and I would venture to guess, and I'd love to see if you have an estimate. I would venture to guess that the vast majority of managers don't think about this coaching aspect or career coaching aspect with their team members. And I very much like that you've got this 3-part structured conversation here. So if you could also talk us through that, I think that's very useful.
Yeah, I will. By the way, you're right. It is overwhelming majority of managers. Actually, what happens, a lot of managers allow themselves to get painted into a corner. So their employee says, hey, I would love to come talk to you about my career. The manager's like, oh, cool. Employee shows up and it's all about the promotion they didn't get. And promotions stink. We like them. They're a little bit more money. Ideally there's some more scope. I get it. Like I've gotten promoted and I've enjoyed it, but in terms of the long-term career outlook, they're actually bordering on meaningless. And I find a lot of people who think that the promotions, the career, are they're just playing Frogger. Did you ever know the game Frogger?
No.
Oh man, what really popular old like Atari game where you control a frog, and the frog hops from open spot to open spot.
Oh, I do remember that. Sure.
Dodging traffic, jumping onto logs
Yep.
and alligators, and they try to get to a slot. And by the way, they get to the other side of the road, which looks exactly like the side they just left. But going to nowhere special. That's where focusing on promotions gets you. So I thought we just needed a better way. And actually I cover a decent amount of data in the book about why this is so powerful. But the three conversations are, the most important conversation is actually conversation 2, which is about visioning. This is about developing a shared understanding with your direct report about their dream job, not their 10-year plan or their 5-year plan, not about their next promotion, not about like a real dream job. That, by the way, is almost certainly outside of the 4 walls of this current company. They might have 1 or 2 or 3. I developed a tool. It's on my website for free to help manage it if you have more than one vision, but I think it's important. Like, we're not chiseling this on anyone's headstone. The fact that dream job could change, that's a feature, not a bug. And it doesn't absolve us from doing no planning, right? We plan our weekends, we plan our weddings, we plan our families, we plan our meals, we plan everything. It seems crazy not to plan this thing we spend more than half our waking hours on, our careers. So you and your manager together talk about what is your dream job? What at the pinnacle of your career, your happiest, what is it that you're doing? And then that idea, shared understanding of that, allows you together to actually do conversation 3, which is called career action plan, which is to take the tangible steps required right now to make progress toward that dream. So imagine that dream's the lighthouse in the distance. We're standing some distance away from it, and we can't reach it immediately. That's not a good vision then. Right. But we can start to cut the path. We could lay a couple flagstones down, and I give an organization for that, right? You have to think about your next job. You can make changes in your current role that bring you closer to your long-term career. That's the one everybody skips. There's formal training opportunities, degrees or seminars, things like that can help bring you closer to long-term vision. And then last is developing your network, which is identifying people who can inform and influence all of that. So that's kind of how you do it. So you've got a long-term vision and a short-term plan. That was advice given to me by Sheryl Sandberg, who's an iconic tech executive. Yeah. Meta, she wrote Lean In, Option B, and she's leaving Meta now. And she said you have to have a long-term vision, an 18-month plan. I don't think the 18 months is so important. I just think the idea is short, tangible actions we could take given the long-term dream. So the last conversation I added to the model was actually the first conversation, which I call the life story conversation. So if I'm at this moment in time and I'm staring at that lighthouse in the distance and I know I'm going to start to drop some flagstones, what I learned is it's really important for me to understand the path that got me here. Because basically the idea of that conversation is starting with kindergarten, tell me about your life. And then you probe the pivots, different pivots people made. I don't care if they were in middle school or if they were in their last job and everything in between. Usually when someone made a pivot and you inquire as to why, this helps you understand something they deeply value. Mm-hmm. So questions like, what did you love about that? What did you hate about that? Why did you choose that major? Why did you switch from cheerleading to swimming? I don't care what it is. And, at the end of that conversation, you end up with a handful, call it 5 to 10, what I call core values, not religious ones or something, just things people value in their career. Right. Mm-hmm. And those help guide us for the other 2 conversations. Like, I had a woman one time named Erin. At the end of the life story conversation, I said, what else? She said, I was thinking about this. And when I was at IDG, we were on the forefront of internet monetization and we were so entrepreneurial and we built something from nothing. And that was the happiest I was in my career. Mm-hmm. I said, yeah. She said, is that important? I was like, yeah, Erin, that's pretty important. And so I filed that away and I realized when she came back with her visions, her long-term career visions, her dream jobs, I said, one of those better be entrepreneurial. I built something from nothing. And that's the happiest I was. And luckily it was. She actually, one of her visions was she wanted to own and operate her own spirulina farm. Now you're in Texas. I don't know. Usually if you're in Texas, that means you don't know what spirulina is.
Do not.
Everyone in California does. It's some like high, like very healthy algae. To me, it smells like the inside of a fishbowl. She swears by it. She thinks it's this very powerful thing, and she wants to one day own and operate her own spirulina farm, which she would found. And so anyway, that life story conversation helps us understand what people deeply value in their careers, and helps us make sure that both the long-term dream, the lighthouse in the distance, and the little path, the short-term path we're going to take to get there, we just want to make sure those decisions that we make honor the things that this person deeply values. And so, but then you do it in this order: life story conversation, the path behind; long-term vision or career vision statements, which is the dream job, the lighthouse in the distance. And then last is the career action plan, which is the small tangible steps we take toward that lighthouse in the distance.
So a couple of things, Russ. First, listeners and viewers, how many of you want to work for Russ? How many? Couple? Handful? Just me? I don't know. I'm thinking quite a few. Secondly, I would like to challenge our listeners and viewers, Russ, just as you chew on this and think about this, what difference would it make if you only just put in, as Russ said earlier, 5% of what we've been talking about today? What difference would that make with your team? I really challenge you to think about this, because this stuff we've been going over is golden. So we have a little bit more time here, Russ. I want to be sure and give you the chance to close the conversation as you'd like, but do you have a story or something else that's kind of short that you want to share before we get there?
I think, if I may, maybe just a call to action, if that's okay. So
please, I like action.
Yeah. So I think, especially for the managers listening, but also for aspiring managers as well. Everybody who is a manager once was not one. If you think about it, the only thing that people have every single person has in common at work is that they want to be successful. It's the only thing, actually. And people just want to do great work and be totally psyched while doing it. And an idea that I defend strongly in the book, as you know, is that is the manager, more than any other factor by a long shot, who is most likely to create or destroy the circumstances under which that can happen. Our people are the ones who deliver the result, not the CEO, not the chief, the other C levels. It's the people in the organization who deliver the results. And so it is you, the manager, frontline, midline, top line manager, that is the person who's going to create or destroy the circumstances under which people can do their best work and be totally psyched while doing it. And that's people deserve to be led well. That's why I wrote the book. And I would ask folks to give it a peek, because I think people deserve it. We spend more than half our waking hours at work, and I think people actually deserve to be led well.
I completely agree with that. I'm trying to do my part as well, Russ. So as we come to a close here, remember that this show is listened to by people across the world, which I'm just so grateful to have that kind of a listenership. And people that come to this show, Russ, what they're really looking for is, how do we create a workplace where people actually want to come to work and do their best? How do we create inspirational leaders that lead them to their greatness? And how do we do business that betters the world? With that in mind, what would you like to leave them with?
Yeah, all of those things are fulfilled through excellent leadership. And it's not fancy leadership style. It is brushing and flossing leadership. The charisma people, the leadership style people, those are the teeth whiteners. The people who brush and floss every day. There is a very small number of really high leverage behaviors that, if you demonstrate these over and over and over, your teams will fulfill all three of those purposes that you just described, Alise. Mm-hmm. Peter, you will fulfill all three of those. I am more sure of that now than I've ever been.
Mm-hmm. I think it's beautiful, and I really applaud the work that you're doing in the world, who you are being, the book that you just launched. And once again, let me say thank you for soldiering through COVID. You just got it today. Today's day one. That's usually a very hard day for most people. Thank you, Russ, for being on the show. So glad to know you. By the way, be careful. I have been known to show up on the doorsteps of guests that I've had on the show. So if I'm in Utah, I'm looking you up.
Oh yeah, you're totally welcome. We have a guest house or a guest suite you could stay in that's detached from the house. But hopefully after I'm done with COVID. I think let's just wait a few weeks to make sure I'm done with COVID.
Fair enough. Thanks, Russ. You are amazing. So glad that you crossed my paths. So listeners and viewers, you're so welcome. Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about Russ Laraway, the work he does, or his book, one way that you can start is by going to his website, whentheywin.com. Anything else? Any other websites, Russ, you want them to go to?
I'm so easy to find: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm at all those places, and it's not hard to find me at all.
Yeah, perfect. And I'm in the same boat. So last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch a recorded podcast. We were on the air with Edward Sullivan. He's the co-author of Leading with Heart, 5 conversations that unlock creativity, purpose, and results. We talked about each of those 5 conversations, and Edward shared many examples drawn from his numerous years of coaching. It's pretty amazing. Next week, we'll be on the air with Tiago Fort, talking about his book, Building a Second Brain, a proven method to organize your digital life and unlock your creative potential. See you there. Remember that work is an integral and important part of our lives and can be the one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.